Hello, I'm Jonathan Hollaby.
I'm Arthur Goldstein, and welcome to State of the Union. We're happy to be back.
Today we're going to be talking a little bit, and then we're going to show you the second part of the interview with Tom Shepard. The first part was very good. But we're in a new year now, Arthur. What do you think about another new year?
Well, being as it's a new year, I think we should talk about things that you think are unimportant. We were talking about Michael Mulgrew's recent push to prevent, what do they call that?
Congestion
Pricing,
pricing.
congestion pricing, and you said that that was not an important issue, and I actually agree with you in that I don't have very strong feelings about this issue one way or another. I would not march for or against congestion pricing. I think the issue is that Mulgrew took this stand without consulting us. Mulgrew took a position for the union without bringing it to the executive board, without bringing it to the delegate assembly, without bringing it, God forbid, to rank and file, and he just took this position.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people in Staten Island feel strongly there should not be congestion pricing, and all the power to them, and they can fight for it. Now, Mulgrew lives in Staten Island, isn't that correct? He lives in Staten Island.
It is.
So maybe Mulgrew, as a Staten Islander, thought, well, Staten Island wants this, and I'm a Staten Islander, so therefore I'll drag hundreds of thousands of UFT members and spend their dues money on a lawsuit because I think it's a good idea. And I am the UFT. Je suis le UFT.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
You raise a lot of interesting points, but I think that there's more here. First of all, um, the way that Mulgrew did it and the people that he allied with, he's allying with Vito Facella, right? There's nothing progressive or positive about that. And
There's nothing pro-union about these people either.
so so we need to be careful because the issue isn't the people. If the issue was Vito Facella, oh my God, he's on the same side as Vito Facella. On Medicare, oh my God, we're on the same side as who's that scumbag legislator in Queens, Vicky
Let
Palvino.
let wait, let's be respectful. Let's say Mr. Scumbag, please.
Okay,
It's nice to be important, but it's important to be nice. I tell my students that.
okay. But let's dig into this a little bit. Um, there's a separate. I think there's separate directions to go in. One is about congestion pricing itself. I'm going to come back to that. I think congestion pricing is a horrible idea that
Okay.
really plays some members against each other. There's what Mulgrew did, and you were absolutely right. He paid no respect at all to even the idea that there's some sort of democracy in the union. He just did it because he decided to do it. He aligned with people who we would I mean, who we would not support. I mean, if they ended up on the same side of a good issue, we'd be on the same side. Um, so I'm the issue of whether or not Michael Mulgrew acted appropriately. That's an easy one. No, he doesn't. Right, and this is not the first time. But if I were going to make the case about Michael Mulgrew acting without the authority of the membership, I'd be talking about healthcare. I'd be talking about our contract.
Well,
I'd be talking about
yeah.
let me keep going because I think all of those are big and we'll get to them. But let's come back to congestion pricing. Is this an issue to make hay over? And I think no. And congestion pricing itself is the system where they put in the way there's a toll on a lot of the bridges, they'll put a toll in around, I'm not outlining all of Manhattan, but the from Midtown down to the bottom of Manhattan, and everybody who drives in pays a toll. There are 2 points to that. One is that toll is going to give money, and that money is going to pay for the subways and the buses. And let me say first, There needs to be money for buses and subways, but how we fund them is really important. And the idea of getting money from people who make a ton of money in New York, from millionaires and billionaires, and funding it through progressive taxation is a lot. A toll, like a use tax, like a sin tax, that's a regressive tax. That's a tax that falls heavier, not in this case on the poor, but on the portion of the lower middle class who are car dependent. And they tend to live, you're right, a lot of them live in Staten Island, but here in the Bronx and Throgs Neck, in anywhere where there's not good transportation or where the rapid transit ends, the subway ends, and people have to take a bus to the train kind of thing. People are more dependent on cars. In
That's an issue. The
in the
fact that
fancy
we don't have
suburbs,
sufficient transportation
in the fancy
is an
suburbs,
issue.
like
Are
people
they
have
coming to arrest you, Jonathan? I hear sirens in the back.
oh yeah, yeah, I'm sorry. That's
Have they
yeah,
finally
that's
caught up with you, or no?
yeah, we have sirens in the Bronx. No, in rich suburbs, people won't care. People will do like when they used to try to do congestion stuff in the 70s. They had to they had to find special ways to deal with rich people's taxis, those black cars, because they would double park illegally and they would collect parking tickets and they didn't care. And it's going to be the same for the rich. The rich will still come into New York, they'll still take their cars. The people who are going to get squeezed out are that lower middle class. Some of them intersect with really reactionary types, but not all of them do. And playing class against class, which is what, and I feel like it's fair to label this a New York Times kind of initiative. Playing class against class, I think, is classic New York Times. Michael Mulgrew didn't have any of the conversations that we just had. He doesn't think through it this way. He's actually catering to backwardness and reactionaries. But the issue isn't a cut and dried issue. Congestion pricing is kind of a mess, and I don't like that he did it without consulting people. But I still think congestion pricing is a problem, and it's a problem for our members, and it plays members against members. Um, I don't think that I would want to criticize Mulgrew if I wanted to talk to him about abusing his authority. I've got a lot of other places where I've come to do it before
But
congestion.
it's a pattern. It's a pattern. He's done it with healthcare. He's done it with things that are concealed in the contract that we're not privy to, that we only find out after we vote for it. And it's here too. And he'll get up, in front of everybody and say, "Well, I'm doing the will of the delegate assembly." But here he didn't even pretend. And I think it's emblematic of who Unity is and what they do and their total lack of regard for us. And it comes around to healthcare. Now you talk about pitting members against members. One of the things that really, really turned me against Mulgrew and his entire cult was an email he sent to rank and file. I was working last year, and is that thing he was opposing 12-126? That's it, right? 12-126. If you don't oppose 12-126, if you don't amend 12-126, you're going to pay $1,500 a year in a health premium. He sent an email to that effect, and that was specifically pitting rank and file against retirees. If we don't make the retirees pay, you are going to pay. And the fact is, he was not able to change 12-126, and there was not a $1,500 premium imposed upon rank and file. So it was a lie. But aside from the fact that he lied to us, he directly pitted one portion of the union against another portion of the union. And to me, that is fundamentally anti-union. How are we a union? If we say, if you guys don't do this, those guys are going to get it and you guys will get screwed. This is not only what's wrong with the United Federation of Teachers. It is what's wrong with the United States. It is why we don't have national health care. We don't have national health care because people will say, oh, yeah, but if you get national health care, those people will get it. Those undesirable people, those people who don't work, those bad people. And, it's tied in with racism. But whoever the bad people are or may be, the fact is, that nobody ends up getting anything, getting any benefit at all. And now Mogru is working to take benefits away from us, from all of us, to benefit our contractual adversary, Eric Adams. And it is unconscionable. And rank and file needs to wake up and get rid of this guy. And we need to wake up and get rid of Tom Murphy. Tom Murphy said at the last retiree meeting, well, some people like Medicare Advantage. And I'm sure some people do. You get the I don't know, the $30 back in your Social Security or whatever the hell it is. And I'm sure it's fine, unless you get sick. And then it's really a problem. The people who like it are people who've never been turned down by um, predatory behemoths like Aetna.
Hmm. I actually, through the campaign, and we'll be talking more about this because um, there is going to be quite a campaign to take back the retiree chapter. But through the work on the campaign, I met somebody who was a candidate, and his address was up near where I hike, and I went hiking with him. And he was talking about, from a previous union job, he has health care provided through a Medicare Advantage. And he was talking about that. And he was talking about how his Medicare Advantage works. But forcing people into it, forcing them into an Aetna kind of situation, forcing them into the prior authorizations, it was so refreshing to hear somebody with that sense of solidarity who said, this works for me, but don't you dare try to force it on everybody, because it's not going to work for everybody. And I think that's the situation that we're being thrown. Wait, weren't we supposed to be disagreeing? How do we end up here agreeing all
Well,
the time?
we can fight later. It's not a problem. I'm sure I can think of a lot of things that you will find offensive, and we'll come to those things. But if indeed Medicare Advantage is good, then let people have the choice. You can have real Medicare, or you can have this, thing from Aetna. And really interesting is that the UFT, when they were opposing our opposition to change, they got a couple of former UFT vice presidents. I think Carmen, I forgot
Carmen
Carmen's last,
Alvarez, John
Carmen
Savigny.
Al, right, those two, and a cancer victim, and they all said, no, we need the choice of standard Medicare. And the cancer victim needed it, well, because she had cancer. And the fact is, I've had cancer. Anybody can get cancer. And if Medicare Advantage is not good enough for people who have cancer, then it is not good enough for anybody, because anybody can get cancer. I was pretty surprised when I got cancer. I didn't expect to have cancer, but I got it. I had to pay thousands of dollars, even though I had health care. I was lucky that I had the thousands of dollars in the bank to pay for it and didn't go broke. Um, there is an equity issue in all of this, in that they were trying to get so you could pay, I don't know, $200 or $225 a month to stay in. That would be, I don't know, for my wife and I, would be like $5,000 a year, which I would consider a cut in my pension. And without that option, it's closer to $10,000 a year. And even if it were only $5,000 a year, the fact is, you and I are UFT teacher retirees, and we're okay. I'm okay. I'm assuming you're okay. I mean,
Hmm.
you're a math guy. I don't think you would have retired if you were planning to not have enough money to keep yourself in Yankee T-shirts or whatever it is that you may need or want. But if you were a UFT paraprofessional, that cost would be prohibitive. You would not have a choice. If you were a DC 37 employee, that cost would be more prohibitive because you make less than a UFT paraprofessional. And most city employees probably, I'm not sure, but I think most city employees make less than teachers.
I
So,
I think that's true. Um, by the way, just a plug off topic for a second. This isn't just the Yankees. These are the Pulaski Yankees. This is a minor league team from Western
oh,
Virginia. I think
cool.
they decimated the minor leagues. It's like they made Mulgrew baseball commissioner for a week and saw how much of a mess he could make. But the difference in this disparate impact, where if you're making less, I had don't laugh at me because it's a small amount of money, but I used to pay for blood pressure medicine 99 cents four
Mhm.
times a year for 3 months supplies of one pill that, and I used to take two, and now I'm back down to one pill, which is good. Retirement's been good for me. And I just looked, and I'm now paying $8.40. And look, that's $33.60 a year instead of $4 a year. That's just a small increase. But that happens with other drug, and maybe you can tell us that costs more. And
Well, yeah,
yeah, I mean, I like I'm talking about $33. I'm going to, you're right. It doesn't it doesn't have any effect on me. But if you're making a little bit less or a lot less, that's actually some money. And the drug money, go ahead, because I know you got something to say.
well, since you brought it up, uh, my wife and I are on maintenance medications. I'm not going to say what they are because it doesn't really matter what they are. My wife is on a name brand medicine. I don't even remember the name, but it would have cost $300 a month for us to get this medicine. And the doctor had a generic as a substitute, and he was going to suggest it to us. And but he thought this one, the one she currently takes, is better. So his staff found they had us write the company, and the company has a program, and the company will now pay her copay. So we still have her on this preferred drug, and she pays nothing. And the company makes $900 a month. Still, uh, American companies do that, and um, I am on a generic drug that would cost also $300 a month. And my doctor was really shocked at this because it's generic. And I was looking at Canada and Canadian pharmacies. There are these sites, it says Canadian pharmacy, but they don't sell you things that are approved for Canada. They sell you things that are manufactured in Turkey or I don't know where. Turkey sticks in my head. And I mean, you don't know what they are or where they come from or if they're genuine drugs. If they are, they could be cheaper. Eventually, my doctor found me a substitute drug that he said was just as good. It was $600 a month, but at some pharmacy, $600 for a 3 month supply, but at some pharmacies it was 245. I have no idea why, but I bought a 3 month supply for $245. That's $80 a month about, and I can swing that. But I was very aggressive in looking for alternatives. And another thing I found is that these companies, like the one my wife has, um, the company programs, there is something on the net where they will get you into those programs, and they will charge you. I think it's like, I don't know, $39 a month. They'll get you in, and you pay them for doing the paperwork for you. And once you stop paying them the $39, they withdraw you from the program, and that's very unethical, blatantly unethical.
Wait a second here. So you're now paying how much for these drugs before you and your wife?
Well, for my wife, nothing, which is,
Okay.
very, very reasonable considering inflation and all. It's very reasonable. For me, I found it at about a little over $80 a month, which
And what were you paying before you retired?
$40 every 3 months, or maybe 30. I don't remember, $30 or $40 every 3 months.
So
I think
like
$30.
$10 a month is now
Yeah,
$80 a month. That's like my $1 becomes $8, except now this is like real money.
yeah, but because mine is generic, there is no company program to assist me. And I've had some conflicts with some of the UFT retirement advisors. They've been upset at me for writing about this stuff. But nobody. They said, "Oh, your cost can be higher or lower," but nobody said they could jump so outrageously high. And if I were DC 37, this would be prohibitively high. I don't know. I don't know. DC 37 might have a different program. I don't know. But the UFT program, what if I'm a UFT paraprofessional? I'm on this program. And what if I am not aggressive enough to, research as much as I did and find out
Wait,
as
wait a
much as I
second. The
did?
UFT didn't find this stuff for you? You had to find it all on your own?
Absolutely. My wife's doctor was good, but for me, because it was generic, excuse me, because it was generic, I had to do it all on my own. And nobody prepared me for this, and nobody warned me sufficiently, in my view, about this. And I want to say it's not the fault of the UFT consultants. It's not their fault. They do what they are taught and trained to do. But
Stop for 1 second. You're saying consultants. You meant the pension consultants?
yes,
Okay.
it's not their fault. It's absolutely not their fault. They're still going to be mad at me for saying this, even though I say it's not their fault. But they should be trained to deal with all of this. We should know in advance that there are these programs, that there are these predatory companies who will make people pay for these programs, that there are alternative ways to buy drugs, and that some of these so-called Canadian drugs are not Canadian drugs. I was going to buy one, which would have been, I think, $200 a month, which said it was approved for New Zealand. And I don't know where they were manufactured, but that made me feel better than they're manufactured in Turkey or I don't know where. I'm sorry to pick on Turkey. It's just the only country I remember.
I like
There were
Turkey.
many countries. Yeah, yeah. Nothing against Turkey. I'm sure that they could be as good or as bad as anybody. And the pharma companies in the United States, well, I'm not loving these companies.
Wow. So I think there's a deep topic here. I don't think that we're is that is that Toby?
That's Julio.
No.
Julio's a little louder than Toby. I'll tell you one more thing, Jonathan. You are not on Medicare,
No.
so if you had the drug that I have, you could get it. I think the price was, I forget what the price was, but with Good RX, there was a monthly price you could pay 25% of, and it would have been a reasonable price. I forgot what it was for the drug that I wanted to take. But because I'm on Medicare and because I have Medicare prescription program, you can't use GoodRx with Medicare. I don't know why not, but you can't use that program in conjunction with the Medicare program. And that's crazy. That is damaging to people, and it's damaging to Medicare. It makes everything cost more for everybody.
This whole thing is crazy, but we it's not just crazy. There's got to be information. There's got to be people rather than you with your personal experience or me with my lack of experience. There's got to be people who know this stuff who can share this with members to get us more informed so that we're better able to navigate this or to make things better. And
Well, I
we should come
volunteer.
back.
If Michael Mulgrew wants to hire me to teach people about this, which he doesn't want to hire me, even though I know about it, because I tell the truth about what
Mhm.
he does to members, and that disqualifies me from a union job.
Yeah.
The
So I do want to come back and talk about prescriptions another day. We're not done with this topic. This is a real serious issue. But we have the second part of the interview with Tom.
Yeah,
We move on to
Tom.
it.
It's about time we showed these people. How long ago did we speak to Tom? What was it, 4 or 5 years ago? How long did we talk to Tom?
4 or 5 years ago, maybe
Four or
3
five
weeks
years?
ago.
3 weeks ago. Okay, I was close. three three is pretty close to 4 and 5, so I'm almost right there. So we're gonna go directly to Tom now.
Very good.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
But that trick never worked.
This time for sure. Presto! Well, I'm getting close.
And now it's time for another special feature.
So Tom, I'm a big devotee of Diane Ravitch, and her first book that really blew my mind was The Death and Life of the Great American School System. And she wrote that mayoral control was a big thing that anti-education groups pushed because, democracy is so messy, and probably many of the votes that you described would not have gone the mayor's way had the community had a chance to vote. So they have achieved mayoral control. Bloomberg achieved it, who is one of the most anti-public education figures I can think of. I was horrified that he almost ran for president a few years back.
Yeah, right.
What do you think that, people like us, who I would consider to be not insane, can do? What kind of system could we establish to replace mayoral control here in Fun City?
Okay, so there are three things to unpack in that, right? So I first of all, I'm clear that if we're going to have a conversation about mayoral control, that we have to put it in some context, right? And the first part of that context is understanding that um these things are power grabs, right? And
I'm sorry, I messed up. I
historically,
thought that this was coming from the computer and not these, and now I can't hear you at all.
uh-oh,
Let's try it
can you hear
How
again.
me?
about now?
Okay, now I hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so to answer your question, I think we have to there are three things to unpack here, right? So the first one is understanding we have to put in some context. And the first part of mayoral control is it's a power grab, right? Um, you know, I think in New York City to have a conversation about mayoral control, we have to go back to about 1968ish, right? And one of the early school board, the city school board, had 7 members,
Mm-hmm.
right? Had 2 mayoral appointees and 1 from each borough, right? And the community, especially in places like you know uh you know Ocean Hill, Brownsville, East Harlem, Chinatown, right, we're like, nah, we want to be able to, like there needs to be some community control here,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's where the community school districts came from, right? So it started with Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and East Harlem and Chinatown. And um you know there's the whole history there, and I think, like, people can dissect that, but the net result at the end of it, right, like once they dismantled that district, right, the experimental districts, what they did was they replaced it with the community school districts that we had for like 30 some odd years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the map that we look at today with our CEC districts are basically the community school districts that were put in place at the end of the experimental districts with Ocean Hill, Brownsville, East Harlem, and Chinatown. Right now, the people frame this in the context of corruption as justification for the power grab. And I am not naive enough to say that there was no corruption, right? Of course, there's none of these systems are perfect, right? Because I look at the system today and see corruption, as well. And it's a different kind of corruption, but it's a corruption where, no one seems to be able to stop it, right? Because you can't vote, there's no voting process to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
it. So that's one part to unpack. The second part to unpack is when you look at where mayoral control exists and where it does not exist, right? It is a function of racism. And, that's the part that becomes really kind of touchy for people. But that is, in fact, the truth. If you look at where the places where you had and still have mayoral control, right? They are places where you have a majority of Black and brown people of color, right? New York City. I mean, even back then, right? 70%, 50% of the population was, Black and Hispanic, right? Now, 70% of the population is Black and Hispanic, right? You look at Washington, D.C., 92% of the population is Black and Hispanic, right? You look at Chicago, every place where you have mayoral control, right? They are places where people of color exist in large numbers, right? You look everywhere else in the country, you ain't got that. And you ain't got that because people ain't trying to hear it, right? You are not going to take away our ability to be like self-determining, where in Black and brown communities that routinely happens, right? So it's a power grab. So there's those two dynamics. And then the third part is, what do you do in place of, right? Because I think in New York State, the thing that the legislature is grappling with, and even the community, is if we don't have mayoral control, what do we have? And I would say that, and this has been my position kind of long term, we need to look at this in like two ways. One, you can there's something to be said for systems of scale, right? So in the largest public school system in the entire country, there are ways to, save in terms of things like purchasing power, etc. Right? Like you would figure that places like, Scholastic, book manufacturers, like you can negotiate with them differently as a million student school system than a small school system with like 10,000 kids, right? And so it gives you some leverage, it gives you kind of economies of scale, right? Now, that said, what do you have if you don't have mayoral control? Like, what does that system look like? I think right now you can tweak the current system to make it more community centered, right? And then have a separate conversation about not mayoral control, about school governance, and have the stakeholders, including students, right? Like, I believe that students should have the ability to vote on what education looks like for them, right? So, have all the stakeholders, students, parents, educators, administrators, elected officials, right? All in the same space, and really design what it looks like for New York. Because I think New York is much different than every place else, just in terms of size. So there's that part. And then there's the tweaking part that you can do right now to end mayoral control. So that 13 member, group, break that up. I think you can set this up where you have four major like stakeholders, right? So the mayor, I would not say that the mayor does not have a responsibility in this, so should have representation, 5, right? Your borough presidents, 1 each, 5. Your parents, CEC members, 5. That's 15, right? 2 student members, 17,
Let me
right?
interrupt you. I recall there being
Yeah,
student members who didn't have a vote. Is that correct?
right. That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's ludicrous, huh?
Right. I believe that as well. And my thing is, if you're going to have 2 student members, let those 2 student members vote,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So in that one act, right? Mayor gets 5, parents get 5, borough presidents as a group are 5, 2 students, right? You have 17 members, right? And you can have, I still believe that there is a place for like the comptroller as a non-voting member, to really, help the board analyze like contracts and budgets and those things, right? Um, but doing that and then giving that group like an additional responsibility. And that one responsibility would be the ability to hire or terminate the chancellor.
Oh, I love it.
Well, every other school board in the country, right? The school board, has the authority to hire or terminate the superintendent, right? Why? What makes New York City different, right?
Why
And
in New
if you,
York City do we have a chancellor that represents the mayor rather than the students? Clearly,
that's
the
correct.
chancellor represents the mayor. That's been going on for a long time, and that's horrible.
So
And
Tom, on
yeah, I wanted to add one more part because
go
I
ahead.
do think that that's at the city level, right? Because, and then at the community level, right? If you added the same responsibility to your education councils as far as the ability to hire or terminate the superintendents, right? Then there is a now built-in level of accountability, right? So who do superintendents answer to? They answer to the education councils, right? Who does the chancellor answer to? He answers to the city school board, right? And if you do that, right, that can almost be a transition system, right? So that's what we put in place, or this is what I would recommend that we put in place while there is this larger conversation happening with all the stakeholders about how do you redesign the system in the long term, in a way that is beneficial for students and families.
So I've got a couple of questions, but you just brought me right to the one that I really wanted to ask, which is, this past Tuesday, December 5th, I saw you.
Mhm,
We were both in the auditorium at DeWitt Clinton High School. We
mhm.
were we were two of the, I don't know how many people testifying against mayoral control. Apparently
40.
there were a couple of people in favor. Well, I was number 43, and there were waitlist people. So I think there might have even been more than that. But there were a
No,
lot
there
of
were
them.
40. There
It
were
was four.
40 that testified because you had 2 that were like had regular numbers that didn't show up.
Okay. So
Um,
So walk
go
us,
ahead.
and we brought up good issues. I missed a lot of it, but everybody was telling good issues, and it wasn't really well attended. But talk us through this process. First of all, we were not talking to the mayor. We were talking to the state education department.
That's correct.
What can we be successful like this? What's gonna happen? What do people have to do? Because I like to have an activism edge to what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So, I think this time around, right, there is, I would believe, more appetite for the state legislature to actually do something, right? I think this administration has shown, um, single-handedly, right, um, all the problems with mayoral control. Um, so the last time we got, parents and communities fought to have the law updated, we added this component, because it seemed like every other time there was a renewal of mayoral control, in the state legislature, it was almost knee jerk, um, fashion in terms of whether or not it would be renewed or not, right? And what we wanted to add in this was a component that very clearly took into account the voice of the community. So that's why we are here. And we wanted that out of the hands of like the mayor. We wanted it out of the hands of like the city council, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the, state legislature and the governor who will sign a law that defines what school governance looks like in New York City, right? So we wanted to, um, have the people that look at the voice of the community be separate from like the direct stakeholders, right? So that's why you have the state education department tasked with these hearings. And what they are going to do is then draft a report that is going to go to the state legislature and to the governor, with the voice of the community and what our recommendations are. So there's that part of it. I would say that the best way to move this, right, is for people to come out and share their individual stories, right? Like be clear about how this system does not work for them. During my testimony, I just highlighted three things, and one was the unresponsiveness of this system as it relates to parents and matters of like school utilization. Right, we spoke about that earlier. Another one was, the absolute refusal of this mayor to implement or comply with the law as it relates to class size, right? And the third was, um, this administration, but not just this administration, every administration, really using the law or circumventing the law to do what it wants to
Yep.
do, right? Like, and the example I used was the use of emergency declarations to circumvent the budget process, right? Um, so I think what needs to happen is people have to show up and just share their story. Like, you know, West Side High School, right? Like West Side High School, Young Women's Leadership School, right? Like, everybody, there were 135 people that gave testimony that night, right? And then at the end of it, it was like the mayoral appointees, every single one of them said yes again, right? And, that's just one example, but there are dozens of examples just from my 3.5 years, right? But the cool thing is all the videos there back to like 2010, right? So I tell people, just come in, tell your story, tell what the impact of these decisions were, how the system did not listen to you at all, how this system does not work despite what your activism, your showing up. Like, their parents that show up month after month and year after year talking about like students with disabilities, right? And how the system won't give them a bus ride to school or give them the related services that they have a right to, right? You come in and explain or share that story, how you have been in this fight for that long, and at the end of it, guess what? The system is completely unresponsive. So that would be my suggestion. And then have that, if people are sharing those stories, right, then that's what goes into this report that the state education department is going to give to the legislature and the governor. And then those same people now have to go and pressure the legislature with the findings from that report and say, this is why we need to get rid of mayoral control. We will not accept anything less than getting rid of mayoral control. And we can have us a conversation about what it looks like long term, but we need to get rid of it. We need to get rid of it now.
I'm in.
I've got
Mhm.
I guess it's a Bronx where we talked about
Yeah.
Jamaica High School being closed, and I think all of the 114 high schools were closed. I don't think so many of the 113, the zip codes in
Yeah.
there's a demographic line across Queens, but in the
Yeah, that's
Bronx,
the
my
Mason
high
Dixon
school,
line, they call it, right? You got North Queens and South Queens.
yeah, we got in the
Wait,
Bronx,
wait,
we
wait.
lost
I just have to ask that
all of our
question
regular.
because I'm at Francis Lewis High School, and we're about a mile or two away from Jamaica High School. I want to know where that line is.
We should dig up a map. I used to be a cartographer.
Okay, maybe
We
we
could
cut
find that
that,
line, although it's
Jonathan.
not precise. But in the Bronx,
Mhm.
there is no line. All of I was a teacher at Columbus. It was devastating and I went to a lot of those hearings. There weren't too many regular teachers who just showed up. I was at Clinton and I was at Smith and I was at one of the small. they even broke up schools and then broke up the schools that had been broken up,
Right.
and they just sat there passively, no expression, and voted the wrong way. But I don't want to talk about. I did want to mention that I was at Columbus and then the Bronx got. Is mayoral control harder on the Bronx than anywhere else? Are we getting extra screwed, or is it really just horrible for the entire city?
I'm gonna say yes and no, right? Like it's a little more complicated than that. I do tell people that if you look at the city as a whole, the Bronx generally tends to take these things on the chin a little harder. And a lot of it has to do with demographics, right? Like, you know, because the borough is primarily, Black and Hispanic populations, right? There's a large, Muslim population that lives in Parkchester. There's a large West Indian population and African population that lives along the west side of the Bronx and in the North Bronx. But the major populations of people in the Bronx are just Black and, like, not just, but you know what I mean, like Black and brown people. And what happens is, when systems are designed to disenfranchise Black and brown people, wherever you have more Black and brown people is where the impact is going to be felt the most, right? So when you look in this city, where does it play out, right? Plays out in the Bronx as a borough, right? It plays out like in Manhattan north of 96th Street, right? It plays out, um, in like Brooklyn, in like Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, right? Like it plays out in parts of the city where there are, you know, large populations of Black and brown people. Like I would say, as an individual district, right? The single district that got hit the hardest with mayoral control is, oddly enough, in Brooklyn. District 16 got hit the hardest, right? That's Crown Heights. I mean, not Crown Heights. Bed-Stuy got hit the hardest, right? Um, but then once you take a step back and you look at the rest of the city, where were the negative impacts of a system that disenfranchises Black and brown people play out, right? And it played out more or on a larger scale in the Bronx. And so, like I said, the question is a little nuanced, but generally speaking, I would say, yeah, the Bronx did get hit harder than everyone else, but it's a function of demographics. So in places where you have larger populations of people of color, especially Black and Hispanic people, is where it played out the most.
Um, I have one last question. I don't know if you
Mhm.
want to go first, Arthur. This is not a me question, but I think it's more of a Tom question. Which is, I understand that people are going to be able to get more of your thinking and your thoughts on an upcoming, maybe an ongoing media channel. You want to tell us
Yeah.
a little bit
So
about your project?
I am so I'm talking to you from my desk, and like the fish tank behind me has been there with my fish in it for the last 3 years, 3.5 years while I've been in these spaces. And what I decided to do was start a YouTube channel. And I'm in the process of just kind of reorganizing everything to do that. And there's more information coming soon, right? But the point of it is to really look at um, uh, education in this city as a function of New York City politics and New York City and New York State politics, right? Like, I think it's important for people to understand that the environments that or the way that things play out in their neighborhoods and their schools is a function of city and state politics. So to help them understand the politics of it, and then like lead them to like the impacts of it in places like the Bronx, in places where we have communities of color. Like I want to do that as a contribution, as something to give back, so that as we show up in these spaces, we can have really honest and difficult conversations with our elected officials, um, uh, and hopefully be able to move things forward. So that's my my upcoming project. I'm, like I said, in the process of just kind of getting everything together, and I, hope to be making episodes probably in the next like 60 days or
Well,
so.
we look forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom. We really appreciate you taking your time to spend with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.